Hey, Steve Saretsky here. As always, this is it's the Canadian real estate market update for November 2017. I'm going to touch on Vancouver and then follow up with Toronto. I mean, obviously myself being an agent in Vancouver, looking at these numbers every single day, watching the market, being active out with people, feet on the ground perspective, I can tell you the Vancouver market inside and out. I know exactly how it's moving on a day-to-day basis almost. Whereas Toronto, I can't really speak for it. I obviously don't work there, but I am talking with several agents there that I know and trust on a weekly basis. So I can give you some perspective on that market. But obviously, if you want a really in-depth, market analysis on that, I would recommend reaching out to someone else that's actively working in that field. The one thing I think with a lot of realtors is they're very hesitant to talk about the market in fear of maybe scaring people off or whatever. So thankfully, when I'm able to talk to these agents, they're people that I trust, that I can get their honest opinions on sort of behind closed doors, and basically just taking that information, whether it's bearish or bullish, and putting it together and basically trying to find that middle ground and trying to be as subjective as possible, so I can really try to provide you the best analysis so you can go ahead and make your decisions. Obviously full disclosure, as I've said from the get-go, people are always asking me like, hey, what should I do in this market, Steve? Like, should I be buying or should I be selling? Like, where do you think prices are going? And like, the reality of it is nobody ultimately knows where prices are going to go. And I can't answer your question of should you buy or should you sell, because I think it ultimately comes down to what is your belief on financial markets? What is your world view? What do you think is a good investment? Why are you buying or why are you selling? And so it's such a complex thing. I can certainly tell you what's happening in the market, and hopefully that will influence your decision. But I can't tell you what you should be doing, because again, you have to always ask, why are some people buying? Why are people buying multiple investment properties? And then why are some people holding out? And some of them have been holding out for 5 or 10 years. It's really just different worldviews. Some people don't like debt. Some people think that buying real estate is a hedge against inflation and central banks printing money. Some people think that this is we're in a huge credit bubble and this thing is bound to deleverage. This is something that I've talked about frequently. But at the end of the day, right, you have to basically form your thesis and then basically, make your investments on that thesis, right? It's like, why do people invest in cryptocurrency and something that's an absolute joke? Like, it's just all comes down to your worldview. So, some people say that's a good investment. Some say it's a Ponzi scheme. But that comes really back to Canadian real estate. So hopefully this analysis will help you formulate your opinions on the market. I really try to be as unbiased as possible. I know that, that's basically starting off with Vancouver. The detached market, as I've talked about numerous times, is basically going through a cool down or a correction, whatever you want to call it. After the foreign buyers tax, things really dropped off. We had a rebound in the spring, and now things are back and trending on the downwards. The sales to active ratio is 11%. That's indicative of a buyer's market. Again, obviously it's not to say that you need to go and buy. It's just saying that the negotiations, the leverage is mostly in the buyer's court. So we're seeing like a lot of price reductions. It's basically what's happening is sellers are starting to cut their prices. A lot of them are still they don't really realize that the top of the market was really about a year ago. And so they're having a tough time adjusting to these new realities, and that's why real estate prices are so sticky. They don't just drop instantly overnight, unless of course you have knee-jerk reaction policies like a foreign buyer's tax, because people stick to their prices, right? Again, this is just conversations. You can see, I see it every day having conversations with sellers. Like, they think their house is worth X because buddy got it a year and a half ago. But the market is constantly changing, and new listings are starting to pick up in Vancouver. I think in Vancouver they're up 13% on a year-over-year basis, but they have been increasing over the last 6 months. The total inventory levels for the month of November increased to a 10-year high for the month of November. So inventory is climbing in the Vancouver detached market. I believe it's up 13% year-over-year. So, and sales sales are actually up 21% on a year-over-year basis in that detached market. But it's, again, always, you know, the biggest thing is there's so many ways to interpret statistics and so many ways to spin it. And there's been so many, I've seen this so many times. It's interesting just going back and studying markets. Like, go back and study the 2007, 2008, 2009 housing crisis. Go read the National Association of Realtors monthly reports and just see how they basically manipulated the wording and all these reports. And the head economist eventually came out and says, yeah, you know, I was told to paint a positive picture, and he ended up resigning because the guy literally just was, you know, his spirit was crushed because he was just getting ripped online, and he had to basically toe the party line. So my objective here is ultimately to provide you with hopefully is a balanced perspective, and I don't really try to hold anything back. You know, the detached market, again, like I said, is going through, if the average sales price is up 0.6% on a year-over-year basis, but if you look at this couple charts that I've posted, whether it's the average or the median, you can see that it basically dropped after the foreign buyer's tax, picked back up, and now is back down again. So it's basically, and then you look at the benchmark, it's basically flat. They did the same sort of thing. It's flat and now trending down. And so that, to me, is a early indication, especially with the sales to active ratio, that there's a lot of pressure on the detached prices. I think they will continue to move downwards, at least in the next couple months. I don't know how the spring market shapes up, but I think that you are throwing on OSFI stress test in January, which will affect 90% of borrowers who are now, you know, in Vancouver, are low ratio borrowers. Those will be affected by the stress test, unless, of course, you go into a credit union. But yeah, that's basically where the detached market is. The inventory is rising, sales are trending down, and new listings are trending up. You know, new listings for greater Vancouver area were substantial. I think I posted one of those charts on my Twitter page the other day. But yeah, so for whatever reason, sellers are now really starting to list their houses. I don't know if that's because the stress test is coming up, or if maybe the message is finally getting out that, hey, you know, peak pricing in the detached was about a year and a half ago. So that's where we're at. And then if you switch over to the condo market, basically, yeah, things are still going strong there. But most of that action is in the one bedroom segment. If you're looking for price gains, multiple offers, that's mostly coming at the one bedroom segment. Some affordable stuff. So like in Vancouver, like a 2-bedroom under 800,000 is almost always going to get multiple offers. The prices there are still inching upwards, but we're seeing a lot of price slowdowns in that higher stuff, right? So obviously the detached, but even like 3-bedroom townhouses, more expensive 2-bedroom units, prices are basically starting to flatline. And again, I don't know if that starts to change in the spring as we have our usual busy spring season, or does the stress test come on and, you know, dampen that further? Like, I don't know, but that's basically what's happening. Is what we're seeing is the majority of people that are active in the market is that first-time buyer segment. They're looking for affordability. They're basically, you know, what can I afford? And so they're driving up the prices of, you know, because everyone's basically competing for this last bit of affordability. Prices have been driven up. I think that you have the buyers today are majority of what seems to be first timers, local investors, people just looking to basically get in and get a second property or whatever. But yeah, condo inventory hit a new low for November, so that's very different than the detached market, right? Yet condo inventory still actually falling, and the detached market inventory climbing quite a bit, substantially. So two very, very different markets. The condo market prices are up 20% on a year-over-year basis, whether you want to use the average price, the median, or the price per square foot. That's pretty much cut and dry. Condo prices are up 20% this year. But that's, again, like I said, that's starting to look like it's leveling off, particularly at the higher end. Anyway, switching over to Toronto, I'm not going to touch too much on this market. But again, this is sort of my overall understanding of it based on my conversations with other realtors and looking at some of the numbers. I think it resembles somewhat similar to Vancouver in the fact that most of the price movement and downwards pressure is on the detached markets, that more expensive product. This is for the GTA, so I guess the overall Toronto area. Some of the stats, the average price is down 2% on a year-over-year basis. I think like the real estate board there somehow spun it that the average price actually increased though on a month-over-month basis. So again, you can sort of skew or say these stats any ways you want it. I think it's important to look at all the factors. I think that looking at year-over-year can be misleading because you're comparing 1 month in a single year to 1 month in this year, and the month over month, the average prices can fluctuate a lot. So I actually like to look at a rolling average, like what's the 3 or 4 month rolling average, like a quarterly rolling average. So you have, that's a pretty good trend. Like a 4-month trend or a 3-month trend is pretty telling of how things are starting to shape up. And so from what I can see in Toronto, the benchmark is another good one to look at, combining the condo market with the detached market, and I guess all segments. The benchmark in Toronto or GTA area has declined for 6 consecutive months. So I mean, I think that's substantial because the benchmark is, but I want to reiterate that that's combining the detached with the condo market. So as you have detached really starting to slack, and you have less detached houses selling, that's going to change the sales mix. So naturally that's going to push some of the prices down. So it's kind of important to segregate or segment the detached between the condo market. And so in Toronto, it seems like most of that downwards pressure is on the detached market. Condo prices are still up 11% on a year-over-year basis, while the detached is down 6.2%, and that's on the GTA area. So a couple other things I quickly want to point out that I think are very, very important, I think, which highlight the market that is under pressure, that's in the midst of a potential correction. Things to look for is the days on market, which in the GTA area is up 41%, and then again, total inventory, active listings are up 110% in the GTA area. So again, I think that's pointing, and then you're going to throw on a stress test on top of that in January. I think that's a market where I think Toronto is going through sort of quite a rapid cooling down here, quite a rapid correction if you want to call it. But again, I don't know if that means condo prices hold firm like they did in Vancouver, or are they going to follow that detached market? I don't know how that all shapes up, but that's basically the story. The crux of it is that most of this cooling down is coming from that more expensive segment. But obviously, I think the big difference between Toronto and Vancouver is when we had our foreign buyers tax in Vancouver, the new listings basically got slashed in half. Sellers basically held out. They weren't getting their prices. They took them off the market. This allowed inventory to drop down. Prices basically picked back up in the spring. And like I said, we're starting to normalize again, where listings are back up and prices are leveling down. But in Toronto, the new listings actually increased after the foreign buyers tax, and they continue to increase really month over month. So that's been the big difference. Basically, people are reacting differently, I think, in Toronto than in Vancouver, where sellers are saying, okay, gosh, this might be the top. And so they seem to be sort of running for the exits, at least in that detached market, where again, new listings up 37%, inventory up 110%. To me, that is substantial. And again, I don't know how this all shapes out. I wish I could tell you whether or not, what you should do with your investment money. I don't there's no one size fits all investment advice. Some people will say it's a dip in the Toronto market, time to buy. Some people say this is just the start of the correction. It's really your understanding. What's your belief? And just looking at the opposing views, whether you're bearish or bullish. It's very interesting just seeing some of these arguments out there, and really just creating your worldview. Anyways, that's all I got for today. If you have any comments, questions on the markets, put them below, specifically in the Vancouver market. Like if you have any statistical questions, like if you want to know, hey, what's the days on market for Burnaby detached houses, like I will send you the graphs and data for that in the comments below. Toronto data, I don't really have any. I can try to round some up for you. Ask me some questions. I can try to point you in the right direction. But Vancouver specifically, if you have any questions on the markets, I will send you all the data that you want. That is, my help to you, again, to help you formulate whatever decision that may be. All right, hope that helped, and talk to you soon.